You found us, yes, another Speaking the Language of Youth event. My name's James Erskine. I'm lucky enough to be CEO of Rocket, the youth marketing and youth content business. Slightly different format this time. We're going to hear from three people in a marketing function. One from Little Lion, that's Kayla. Now, Kayla talks really eloquently about Little Lion's Crystal Maze attraction that's on in London's West End. We're also going to hear from Alyssa, who's from Factory 42, and they've just created, with using tech, a really nice experience that enhances the Science Museum and the Natural History Museum. Finally, we've got Simon from Student Beans, a really well-established brand and media owner in the student space, and he talks to us about different revenue models and the way to engage that target audience. Before we get into the meat of the sandwich, let's stay just on the bread side for a second. I'm joined by Georgia, one of our own. Georgia, you've been at Rocket just over a year, right?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. Nice. And Georgia, you were lucky enough to work with Alyssa on the launch of these two apps on behalf of Factory 42. Bring it to life for us. What do the apps do, and how do we help to find the target audience for those apps?
So the apps are My Dino Mission AR and My Robot Mission AR, which I got a little bit addicted to over Christmas. And then we partnered with some family influencers of varying sizes, most of whom had a child of each age from the apps. And we worked with them on cross-platform campaign and for them to post about each of the apps and really bring it to life, and you can see the images in their homes and their kids running around playing with them. And that went live over February half term, which was pretty nice timing with lockdown, everything. And it was nice content creation as well.
There's so much to unpick with this particular example of work, Georgia. Two big themes that I saw, and again in the chat with Alyssa. One was around what technology brings to a campaign, what it can bring to the marketing function of any business. And the other thing was about using children actually in the content to bring it to life. Where should we start? Authenticity or tech?
I think you can start with tech, because the main thing was having that wow factor, like Alyssa said, and then when you can see, people get really excited about it, and then putting it in that trusted community of influencers makes people want to jump on and get involved and be part of the conversation, which is really nice. And in terms of having children in the content, working across a lot of children's brands on social and influencer campaigns, one of the main questions I see other parents asking is like, would this work for my child? He's 7, things like that. And I think having a child in the content, parents will instantly know that would work for their child, because they can see families like theirs using the content.
I think you're right, Georgia. I think one of the other themes that comes across with all three of the pieces that we're about to see is authenticity. There's tech there, but there's also the thing of brands being useful. I mean, Student Beans, one of the things that I really took out from there is they're talking about appealing to people that want to see a social purpose from their brand, but actually often youth audiences are just motivated by a special offer and looking for value. I suppose looking for value is a key factor in any product development.
So yeah, it's really important for brands to be valuable, especially in the family space, because with children being on again, off again with school, it's been quite confusing for them. So it doesn't always have to be something that can be monetized being valuable, as long as you can provide something useful for families and especially parents. And if you can give a tip, a trick, an activity, 5 minutes to keep them busy, anything like that will be really rewarded for you.
The other thing that the brands were trying to wrestle with was this kind of dual issue about remaining relevant and also being very, very useful. And I think what was fascinating in a couple of the conversations that we had was that they were needing to better understand the audience before they could better engage the audience. So that kind of research insights bit. And the other issue that I saw emerging, and it actually acts as a platform to go to an even bigger debate, but one of the things around corporate and social responsibility versus brand purpose and what a brand stands for. Because one of the things that we don't see is a brand purpose being different from what a brand should stand for. And they're not necessarily the same thing. The final theme, I think, is around the experience economy. Everybody is looking to create an event or some kind of experience, whether that be online or in real life. You just have to look at the gigs and the concerts that were going on in Twitch during lockdown to see how the world is now ready for digital events as an appointment to view. With that said, Georgia, what was the best thing that you took out of the 3 interviews?
Definitely timing is really, really key. Things are moving so quickly and also slowly at the moment, but with different announcements happening all the time and how that can affect everyone, it's so important to be really mindful of that when you're talking to your audience, especially the family audience. Everyone's been affected, but I think there's been a lot of emotions around schools and the term times not really being like they normally are. So I think it's really key to be aware of what's going on in there, and just showing that empathy and understanding for what everyone's going through, because there's definitely been a focus on mindfulness everywhere this year, but being aware of that as the brand is really important, so you know that there's a human in there.
It's so true, isn't it? And I suppose as we get into these 3 interviews, it's worth having a look at both those messages around self-care, mental health, how to target children in a responsible way. And then I suppose the other one that I really took this kind of takeout was Alyssa from Factory 42 was saying, what does the tech bring and why are we using it? And I loved her 3-point rule, that wow, respectful and connection. Often people say the opposite of connection when brands are not working as hard as they could do to reach their target audiences. We're going to go to somebody called Alyssa now. Alyssa's great. She works at Factory 42. She's got a real world example of how technology is fusing not only a brand, but a business and helping other brands talk to their target audiences in an entirely new way. I'll let her explain.
So I'm Alyssa Bonic. I'm the Head of Audience and Commercial Development at Factory 42. So we are one of the UK's leading content creation studios, using immersive technologies to bring new experiences to life. I look after developing our audiences and also new business models. So looking at new kind of commercial offers around some of the experiences that we do. And we recently launched a new children's learning division called 42 Kids. And that was off the back of creating 2 new AR apps for children. And they were based around fun learning for kids on a subject of science, especially while they were at home during lockdown, innovating around coronavirus. And yeah, so one of the best things I enjoy about working at Factory 42 is trying new things, and so really kind of looking at the nuts and bolts of new projects, but also trying to bring sustainable value to our existing audiences as well as future audiences. So really looking at where the real touch points and the kind of most useful touch points for immersive technologies to be valid in anything that we do. I would say that at the company we have quite a broad range of audiences. It really depends on the types of experiences that we're creating, but we're very focused on audiences and consumers, and I think that's where a lot of our kind of concept development comes from. So for instance, with the AR apps I just mentioned, we knew that we were already working around a subject of dinosaurs and robots, which I'll go on to explain in a minute, but we knew that kids were at home and we'd all just kind of drastically pivoted because of coronavirus, and that there was this substantial need for learning during lockdown. And so we knew that also children were going to be with their families and with their parents, and so what kind of offer could we provide using the latest immersive technologies that people had maybe in their pocket to be able to bring learning to life. So the first AR app that we launched is called My Down a Mission AR, and that's for 7 to 10-year-olds. That age range, what we know about them is that they are very much in that exploratory, creative, and kind of caring phase. So that allows them to discover about dinosaurs. They can care for them. They can also take fun photos with their family. So it's really learning through that knowledge base of kind of exploring. And then the second app that we launched, so that one was in partnership with the Natural History Museum. And the second app that we launched is My Robot Mission AR, slightly older audience, 10 to 12-year-olds. And we know at that age, they're probably coming slightly under the influence of parents and wanting to explore themselves a bit more and have some more agency around what they create. So you can create your own robot and then put it through its paces in a kind of simulated world environment. So, so what's quite interesting about that one is that your robot can kind of change and flex depending on what's required from the kind of real world environment. So kids can also learn about how to think like a scientist, but at the same time, so what different parts they might need, but also how to respond to kind of real world events and how that affects kind of our environments that we live in. And then just before we launched those apps, and the entire reason we actually did launch those apps is because of coronavirus, we had actually been focusing much more on a location-based experience, so an LBE, using immersive technology. And that was actually, so literally the week that we went into lockdown, we were running this quite large kind of construct in the Metro Centre in Gateshead. And that was actually that was for a slightly older audience. That was for 14 plus. And it was using mixed reality, so new Magic Leap headsets, really the first kind of trials with some of what they were able to do. And so that was kind of bringing immersive technology into shopping centers. So instead of being in people's homes through their phone, we were going to where they were spending time. But of course, this was before lockdown took place. And that was doing really well, especially for, probably more youth audiences that kind of hang out at those locations and just want to try something different and not just go through that regular retail experience. So again, that was broadly based around dinosaurs and robots, but with a slightly edgier content. Just a whole host of different offers, but always understanding what the technology brings to that audience and why. In terms of looking at different age groups and how they might engage with experiences or learn about them, that's something that especially my role really focused on with trying to engage with new audiences with these AR apps. Because what's interesting is, I guess, because we work in technology all the time, we think that everybody understands how to operate, apps using kind of superimposed content, but actually a lot of parents and children are still getting familiar with, what the power of the computer in their pocket. So you do have to, there's probably two jobs there, is finding out about the experience and then knowing how to use the experience. I would say that for my Dino Mission AR, that was more about a probably joint learning experience between the parent and child. And actually that's much more about getting to parents who are, really focused on quality learning for their kids. I think with my Robot Mission AR, again, obviously you have to be cognizant of what you're able to do in terms of getting out to certain age groups from a communications point of view. But what we also tried to do is look at schools and once kind of kids try something quite cool in the classroom, they might not want to take their teacher's advice for the remainder of that, but then they might start talking to their friends about using it, or and if we know that it is an aid to teachers, so we did have quite some success with education institutions downloading my Robot Mission AR, because it's a new way for kids to understand how to create things and use science, and also think like scientists. Then that's another way in as well. We did quite a bit of research there's kind of research center that was formed as part of Audience of the Future called Story Futures, and they are looking at new ways into audiences using immersive technologies. And one thing we did note is that, especially for parents, and kids, they're looking for trusted sources. Thinking about, well, one key outlet for us was definitely the platforms themselves, so the App Store and Google Play, and forming good relationships with them, because there's so much on their platforms. And if they recommend something and really put some support behind it, then that definitely goes a long way. We also looked at, obviously, working with our partners, the Natural History Museum and the Science Museum, and we know that they are trusted, recommended partners, and that they obviously have that expertise in terms of science, so that definitely helps. And then lastly, we were also working with different content creators and influencers who we knew had a strong reputation in that space, and that's really helped us get beyond maybe those initial audiences that would take up the app. So we've seen a lot of interest over the last half term. So I would say that in terms of looking at research around the audiences we were trying to engage with, my approach often is to have the evidence and to gather that within your own circumstance and situation. So as I mentioned, there's this great research center, especially around immersive technologies, called Story Futures. I would highly recommend. They're funded by UKRI, and so I'd highly recommend. They have various reports and kind of touch points across the sectors, and also for brands. I mean, they've worked with a whole range of different companies, from Heathrow to Costa Coffee, and so yeah, they would probably have quite interesting insight into how those technologies are developing and the impact on audiences of a range of ages. But so we did do research by them, and that helped us lay the groundwork for understanding the kind of base that we were playing with, and then we started to test our product against some of those targeted audiences as well, which helped us inform our marketing mix. I would say for, so that was largely for the apps. For our older experience, the one in the shopping centers, Dinosaurs and Robots, with the mixed reality technology. So we did audience surveys, but we also relied quite a lot on the shopping center. So we had a partnership with them to be able to kind of inform who we knew was there on the ground and how they might engage with the experience. So a lot of looking at demographics, and also them talking to the retailers and kind of saying, this is what we think they'd be interested in. And then we actually did, it's quite an interesting approach from them. And you had a lot of their own retailers who worked in the shops come and do the experience and give us a lot of feedback, because actually they knew their customers really well. And so that helped us understand that we were packaging the event and talking about it in the right way to be able to get to those younger customers. So so that really helped as well in terms of ensuring that we had the right communications and an approach to promotion. Just another thought on research around reaching especially youth audiences in different places and spaces, given the fact that with COVID, a lot of those locations are going to have to think about how to reinvent themselves, or how to be relevant to audiences of the future. One thing we did is we looked at a lot of previous experiences and what was successful. And one thing we noticed with younger audiences is that we use this term called in-world, which basically means that instead of just thinking about, well, I must ensure that my customer service when someone goes to the event is bang on. Actually, what you're thinking about is that customer journey from the time you even find out about the event to the aftercare as well, and the shareable moment. So when you say in-world, and what we did is we built a kind of brand called Dimension X, which was about trying to explain what it was like to put on a headset and see something digitally and then physically. And so it was almost a way for us to articulate, you're going into another dimension when you have this experience. And so by talking about it in that way, it was, we started to develop terms like, you become a dimensioneer, you're a dimension agent. And so people start, they're kind of embarking on the narrative before they even start the experience. And that is really appealing to younger audiences who, very story-based, very entertainment-based, and want to be brought along something. And also, there's so much competition out there in terms of standout at the moment. So if you have a strong story from the beginning, and a lot of the larger entertainment brands really understand this, then you can really, you can start to leverage that and also pull audiences along with you throughout that experience. When we did research around the apps, two key elements that came out, and this was post-launch, so we did some research leading up to it to test the concepts and how to engage with the audiences, but two key elements were absolutely learning through doing, which is that experiential learning, which is learning through play, which again is that kind of child-led agency in terms of learning. And again, there's more of a recollection once you've tried something, and if younger generations are not being given that, exploratory opportunities, then that's what they're looking for. But I guess the second thing is we took an approach of entertainment plus education. So again, ensuring that something was in world and had a strong story to it, and that just sends the kids right there. So they want it. They're interested automatically and want to participate. So in my previous role from Factory 42, I was at an agency called Digital Catapult, which was the UK's leading innovation agency for advanced digital technologies. It's quite a mouthful. really looking at those kind of emerging cutting edge technologies, which are not so emerging anymore, but definitely upon us. So immersive, AI, so different uses of data, and then 5G, which is quickly upon us at the moment. And so what I started to understand there is, as much as we were focusing a lot on digital and what technologies could do, it's still, especially in the creative space, entertainment space, and also learning space, is very much about people. And so what I started to realize to focus on, especially in the BC environment, is where are younger audiences going, and how do they consume things, and how do they move through their lives? And I would say that the three things that would be really important that I've kind of took from that and have stayed true throughout the 2 years that I've been at Factory 42 working on actual products is three elements. So that younger audiences are looking for a wow factor, which is where the immersive comes in, something that's highly unique and stands out a lot, and that sensory feeling, which is again what immersive is able to deliver. The second thing I would say is that they're looking for something that is trusted, are quite switched on, and that's where data comes into play. So how a business is using their data to have a respectful and trusted relationship with their audiences. And again, younger consumers are very switched on to this because they're digital natives now and have grown up with all of this. So again, the combination of immersive with data, you start to think about, well, how is that data that they're taking from me when I have an immersive experience being used? And then the third thing is everywhere, every time. So it's kind of being that kind of completely connected, which is what 5G will bring to the mix. And there is this interesting term which we talk a lot about at Factory 42. It's going to sound a little bit probably beyond grasp, but it's something called the metaverse. So I would highly recommend anybody Googles that just to kind of see what they think about it. But basically, that these three technologies are now coming together, and they will provide the new future upon which people shop, live their lives, have experiences. But all to say, I don't think you have to have huge budgets in order to be able to respect the fact that, that wow factor, that trusted relationship, and then thinking about how you bring experiences to people, which is what we've done at Factory 42 through the apps and through the retail experience. I think if you're following those consumption habits of younger generations, then I think that, you will stay current, you will stay with them through their lives and the way that they kind of move through things. So yeah, just being conscious of that. But I've always thought things are people led rather than always just technology is there to assist how people want to kind of be. So just being cognizant of that, because one can spend a lot of money and a lot of time on fancy tech, but it needs to be relevant in the situation. My own personal passion points and interests are in kind of movement and connectivity and that real life kind of connection, especially creatively. But I do think, as much as we are spending time staring at screens or computers, or even younger generations, that there is, and I think COVID really brought this out, there is still that need for connection in terms of physical connection. And I think, as I mentioned it, I think 5G will enable us to be with other people but still do the things we want to do. And it will probably just enable us to have even richer experiences around us all the time. But I do think that, and we've tried to continue to create into our experiences shareable moments. So again, with the Dinos app, you can take a fun photo and you can share that with your family, because that is a unique memory that a child wants to have. With the retail experience, it was absolutely essential that people could play together. They could come together, 6 in a box, and play. And also, I think, as we've seen in trends with immersive theater as well, is that people want to have a personalized experience. So but they have it together, and then they can repeat that experience, and then they can talk about it more. And so, and especially social kind of prove that point, is that people want to be able to talk about the experiences they've had. So I do think the kind of connectivity and sharing will actually just continue. I think it's a human element of who we all are. So and again, just looking at technology to kind of support that in the right ways. Obviously, with younger audience, you kind of need to be also cognizant of when the right moments to do that is. But obviously with the apps, we had all that thinking in place. kind of summary tips for brands thinking about working or kind of, you know, experimenting in that in immersive space? Because I think that the technology and the ways in which people consume immersive is still unfolding. Is to, I think it was recently, I was looking at kind of hearing from different companies investing in immersive tech. And I think that, and again, as COVID has proved, that if there's a societal need for something to exist, or it kind of addresses something like the home learning, which is what we were looking to do through the AR apps that we launched, then I think that that's where things follow and kind of snowball. And so again, I would say really driven by audience behavior, you know, how are audiences really going to take up this technology? And it will take time, and there probably might be a device that people kind of catch on to that they actually they use for GPS or utilities, and then the next thing you know, it's the norm. But I would just say maybe question any strategy around, you know, playing in these spaces that are a bit, you know, that digital innovation space, which is beyond the usual digital marketing mix, is just question maybe, you know, what does that mean for your audience? Is that relevant for your audience? And you know, is that something that they, as you said, are going to think is authentic, or is it something that they feel like it's put on, and so they're not going to want to go there with you? Because it does take educating for audiences to use new technologies, even the young ones.